The moment my mother dropped to her knees in the middle of the living room and began praying out loud for God to make me normal again, I knew the fragile lie I had been living for 23 years was over. Valerie stood frozen in the doorway, her overnight bag still slung over her shoulder, eyes wide with the same shock that had just ripped through my chest. Frances, my mother, didn't even notice her at first. She clutched her rosary so tightly the beads left red marks on her palm while her voice cracked on every syllable. Lord, take this demon from my daughter. Make her clean. Make her like other girls. I'll do anything. I had come home to suburban Chicago that weekend because Dad's heart scare had landed him in the hospital for tests. Valerie had driven me from our apartment in the city, insisting she wanted to be there for support even though we both knew the risk. We had been together for 14 months in secret, stealing weekends, late-night texts, and careful public distance that felt like slow suffocation. But seeing my mother on the floor begging a higher power to erase the person I loved most in the world cracked something permanent inside me. Mom, stop, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The words tasted like betrayal and freedom at the same time. Frances looked up then, mascara already running, and her gaze landed on Valerie. Recognition hit her like a slap. She had met Valerie twice before at campus events, always introduced as my best friend from the literature program. Now the pieces slammed together behind her eyes. The shared hotel rooms during conferences, the way we sometimes finished each other's sentences, the quiet protectiveness Valerie showed whenever Mom's passive comments about settling down with a good man came up. You brought her here? Frances whispered, rising slowly. Into this house? While your father is fighting for his life in the hospital. Valerie stepped forward, calm in that way only she could manage under fire. Mrs. Harper, I'm here because Emma asked me to be. Because she loves her dad and she's terrified. We both are. The word love hung in the air like smoke from a grenade. Frances's face twisted. She had spent years gently steering me toward church groups, blind dates with sons of her prayer circle friends, and quiet lectures about how same-sex attraction was a trial to overcome through faith and willpower. I had nodded along for years, dating boys in high school just enough to keep the peace, crying in my car afterward, then meeting Valerie in a women's studies elective during sophomore year at Northwestern and finally understanding what the word home actually felt like. Now the mask was gone. Dad came home from the hospital 2 days later, thinner but stable, and the house turned into a pressure cooker. Frances had clearly briefed him in the car because he couldn't look me in the eye at first. Dinner that night was silent except for the scrape of forks. Valerie had gone back to the city at my insistence, but her absence only made the silence louder. I don't understand, Dad said finally, setting down his water glass with a trembling hand. We gave you everything. Church, good schools, a stable home. Where did we go wrong? The question landed like a physical blow. I stared at my plate, the lasagna blurring through sudden tears. Wrong. As if loving Valerie was a defect in their parenting instead of the most honest thing I had ever done. You didn't go wrong, I said quietly. I did. I went wrong every time I lied to you. Every time I pretended to be the daughter you prayed for instead of the woman I actually am. Frances slammed her napkin down. This is not who you are, Emma. This is confusion. Valerie is she's filling some void. But you can still choose the right path. We can get you counseling. There are programs. Conversion therapy? The words came out sharper than I intended. Mom, those places destroy people. I've read the studies. The suicide rates. The trauma. She flinched but doubled down. Sometimes you have to break something to heal it. I'm your mother. I would walk through fire for you. That night I lay in my childhood bed staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck on the ceiling at age 12, back when I still believed I could wish myself straight if I prayed hard enough. My phone buzzed. Valerie. How are you holding up? I can come get you right now if you need to leave. I typed back with shaking fingers. I think I'm going to tell them everything tomorrow. No more hiding. Her reply was immediate. Then I'll stand beside you. Whatever happens. The next morning the confrontation exploded before coffee was even poured. Frances had invited Pastor Reynolds over for support, which meant an ambush. The pastor sat at our kitchen table with his Bible open, speaking in that gentle but firm tone that always made me feel small. Emma, the Bible is clear. This is a spirit of perversion. But God is bigger than any sin. Repent, turn away from this relationship, and He will restore you. Valerie wasn't there yet. I had asked her to wait outside until I called. But hearing the pastor reduce 14 months of love, laughter, shared dreams and quiet courage to perversion lit a fuse I didn't know I had. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly. Pastor, with respect, you don't know me. You don't know what it feels like to grow up believing you're broken because every sermon, every youth group talk, every glance from my own mother told me so. I tried. God, I tried for years. I dated men who never felt right. I cried myself to sleep begging to be fixed. And then I met Valerie, and for the first time I wasn't praying to change. I was praying to have the courage to live. Francis started crying again. Dad looked gray. One hand pressed to his chest like the hospital monitors might start beeping any second. You're killing your father, Francis whispered. After everything he's been through. This stress. Don't. I cut her off, voice breaking. Don't put his health on my love. That's not fair. None of this is fair. The doorbell rang then. Valerie. I went to open it before anyone could stop me. She stepped inside wearing the soft gray sweater I loved, her auburn hair pulled back, eyes steady even though I could see the fear in them. She took my hand right there in the foyer in front of my parents and the pastor. The simple act felt revolutionary. Mr. and Mrs. Harper, she said, voice clear and respectful. I love your daughter. Not as an experiment or a phase. I love her enough to stand here and take whatever you need to say to me. But I won't let anyone make her feel ashamed for being exactly who she is. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Frances did something I will never forget. She looked at our joined hands, walked over to the mantel, picked up the family Bible, and held it out toward us like a shield. If you choose this life, she said, tears streaming, you choose it without us. I can't watch you go to hell. I won't. The words landed like a death sentence. Dad didn't speak, but the disappointment in his eyes was worse than any shout. I felt Valerie squeeze my hand once, steady, grounding. And in that moment I made the decision that would burn every bridge I had ever known. I didn't scream or cry in front of them. I simply nodded, picked up my duffel bag that still had hospital visit clothes inside, and walked out with Valerie. The front door closing behind us sounded final, like a coffin lid. My mother's sobs followed us down the driveway. We drove back to the city in silence for the first 40 minutes. Valerie kept one hand on the wheel, and the other reaching across the console to rest on my knee whenever traffic allowed. I stared out the window watching the familiar suburbs give way to highway, feeling like I had just amputated part of myself. When we finally reached our small apartment in Logan Square, I collapsed on the couch and let the tears come. Valerie sat beside me, pulling me into her chest without a word. She smelled like the lavender shampoo we shared and the faint trace of the city rain that had started falling on the drive home. For a long time she just held me while I shook. I'm so sorry, I whispered eventually. I dragged you into this war. She kissed the top of my head. You didn't drag me. I chose you. Every single day I choose you. Even when it's hard. That night we didn't sleep much. We talked instead about the future, about whether I should try one more conversation with my parents, about the very real possibility that I had just lost them forever. Valerie's own family back in California had been cautiously accepting when she came out at 19, but they lived 3,000 miles away. She understood isolation in a way most people didn't. The next few weeks became a masterclass in survival. I threw myself into my editing job at the small literary magazine, working late so I wouldn't have to think. Valerie, a high school English teacher, came home every evening with takeout and patience I didn't deserve. But the guilt gnawed at me. Every time my phone lit up with an unknown number I hoped it was Mom or Dad. It never was. Then the first real blow landed. My younger brother Ryan called from college in Michigan. His voice was tight with anger. What the hell, Emma? Mom's been crying every night. Dad had another episode because of the stress you caused. They're saying you chose some girl over your own family. Is that true? I tried to explain, but the words felt hollow over the phone. Ryan had always been the golden child. The athlete, the youth group leader, the one who never questioned the script. To him I had become the villain who broke their mother's heart. You're selfish, he said before hanging up. I hope that girl is worth destroying everyone who loved you. Valerie found me sitting on the bathroom floor afterward. phone still clutched in my hand. She didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, she sat down beside me on the cold tile and said, "They're hurting. But so are you. And you don't get to carry their pain on top of your own. That's not how this works." Her words were tough love. Exactly what I needed. Over the following month, we built small rituals that kept me afloat. Sunday morning coffee on the fire escape watching the neighborhood wake up. Evening walks along the river where we could hold hands without looking over our shoulders. Quiet nights reading manuscripts aloud to each other. Love, I was learning, wasn't just the grand romantic gestures we had imagined as teenagers. It was showing up when everything else was on fire. But the world outside our apartment wasn't done with us. One afternoon at work, my boss, a kind but traditional woman in her 50s, pulled me into her office. Someone, later I would learn it was a cousin on my mother's side, had posted on Facebook about Emma Harper's lesbian rebellion destroying her Christian family. The post had tagged the magazine. My boss wasn't angry exactly, but she was worried about optics and donor perception. She suggested I keep a low profile for a while. That evening I came home and told Valerie I was thinking about quitting. She listened, then surprised me by suggesting something bolder. What if instead of hiding, you told your story on your own terms? Not for revenge. For the version of you that spent years praying to be fixed. Maybe other girls are still praying that prayer right now. The idea terrified me. I had spent my entire life avoiding attention, blending in, being the good quiet daughter. Publicly claiming my identity felt like stepping naked onto a stage. Yet the more I turned it over in my mind during the next sleepless nights, the more it felt inevitable. My mother's prayer in the living room kept replaying, the desperate, loving, harmful plea that had finally forced my hand. If I stayed silent, that prayer won. To define me as broken. So I started writing. Not a polished essay at first. Just raw journal entries on my laptop at 3 a.m. while Valerie slept. I wrote about the first time I realized I liked girls. At 13, watching the older volleyball captain at church camp and feeling something electric I immediately confessed as sin. I wrote about the boys I dated in high school. How their kisses felt like performing a role I hadn't auditioned for. I wrote about meeting Valerie in that lecture hall. The way her laugh made the room brighter and how, for the first time, my heart didn't feel like it was lying. Valerie read the pages one night after I finally showed them to her. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "This is powerful, Em. But if you publish this, there's no going back. Your family will see it. Your whole community will see it. Are you ready for that war?" I thought about my mother on her knees. About my father's disappointed silence. About my brother's accusation of selfishness. "I'm ready to stop being their secret shame," I said. 3 weeks later, I hit publish on a personal essay titled, "The Prayer That Broke Me Open." I shared it on every platform I had, tagged friends from college, and then I turned off my phone and waited for the world to react. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers, young women in conservative towns who had never told anyone, older lesbians who cried reading it because it mirrored their own youth, even a few former church friends who admitted they had suspected but never dared ask. The essay was shared thousands of times within 48 hours. A major queer media outlet picked it up. Then a national women's magazine. And then my mother called. Her voice on the other end of the line was hoarse, as if she had been crying for days. "How could you do this to us? Airing our private pain for the whole world to judge? Your father had to turn off his Facebook. The pastor's phone won't stop ringing." I closed my eyes, gripping the kitchen counter. Valerie stood a few feet away, watching me with quiet strength. "Mom, I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because hiding was killing me. And maybe if one girl reads it and doesn't feel as alone as I did, then some good came from all this pain." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, the anger had cracked into something raw. "You were my little girl. I dreamed of your wedding in the church, grandkids, all of it. And now I'm still your daughter," I said, voice breaking. "Just not the one you imagined." She hung up without saying goodbye. That night Valerie and I lay in bed facing each other, city lights filtering through the blinds. She traced the line of my jaw with one finger, a gesture that had become our silent language of reassurance. "You did the brave thing," she whispered. "Even if it feels like the world is ending." I wanted to believe her. But the next morning brought the first death threat in my inbox. the first former classmate calling me a traitor to my faith, and the first anonymous letter slid under our apartment door telling me I would burn in hell and take my lover with me. The war I had started was only beginning. The threats escalated faster than either of us expected. Within a week, our apartment building received a visit from police after someone spray-painted slurs on the front steps. Valerie's school principal called her in for a conversation about parental complaints and whether her lifestyle might affect her effectiveness with students. My own boss ultimately let me go, citing restructuring, though we both knew the real reason. We were suddenly unemployed, exposed, and more in love than ever, which felt like the cruelest irony. Valerie took it harder than she let on at first. One evening I found her sitting on the fire escape with a bottle of wine, staring at the alley below. When I joined her, she didn't look at me right away. "I keep thinking about what your mom said," she admitted. "About choosing this life without them. What if she's right? What if I'm the reason you lost everything?" I took the bottle from her hand and set it aside. "You're the reason I finally have something real. Everything else was borrowed time on a lie." She turned to me then, eyes shining. In the orange glow of the streetlights, she looked both fierce and fragile. I kissed her slowly, tasting salt from tears she had been hiding. That kiss turned into the kind of desperate closeness that comes when the world is trying to tear you apart. We made love that night with a tenderness edged in defiance, bodies speaking what words couldn't quite manage. No fireworks or dramatic declarations. Just two women choosing each other again in the middle of the storm. The next morning we made a plan. Valerie would look for teaching jobs in more progressive districts. I would freelance at it while expanding the essay into a short memoir proposal. We would move if we had to, but we would not disappear. Then came the call that changed the trajectory again. My father's number appeared on my phone at 2:17 a.m. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was another accidental pocket dial or worse. But something made me pick up. "Emma." His voice was weak, raspy from the heart issues that had never fully resolved. "It's Dad. I read your essay. Twice." I sat up in bed, heart hammering. Valerie stirred beside me. "I'm sorry for how we reacted," he continued. "Your mother is still struggling. The church community, it's all she's known. But seeing you write about praying to be fixed, that hit me. I remember you as a little girl. Always so serious. Always trying so hard to be perfect. I never realized how heavy that was for you." Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. "Dad, I never wanted to hurt you." "I know. And maybe we hurt you first by not seeing. I'm not saying I understand everything, but I'm saying I want to try. Your mother, she needs time. But I'd like to meet Valerie again. Properly. Not in the middle of a crisis." The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When I hung up, I was shaking. Valerie pulled me close, and for the first time in months I cried tears that weren't entirely from pain. We arranged a cautious meeting at a neutral cafe 2 weeks later. Dad came alone. He looked older, the hospital stay and family stress etched deeper into his face. He shook Valerie's hand with genuine warmth, then hugged me so tightly I felt the years of distance crack open. We talked for 2 hours. He asked careful questions about how we met, what our life looked like, whether we were safe after the threats. He didn't offer blessings or Bible quotes. He simply listened. When we parted, he said, "I love you, kiddo. That hasn't changed. The rest I'm working on." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a bridge. A small one, but enough to keep me from drowning. My mother, however, remained a fortress. She refused to meet, returning every letter I sent unopened. Ryan texted occasionally, short, awkward messages checking if I was alive, but the warmth was gone. The family fracture had calcified into something painful and permanent for some of them. Meanwhile, the essay continued to gain traction. A literary agent reached out. Offers for speaking engagements at universities and LGBTQ centers started arriving. Each invitation felt like both validation and fresh exposure. Valerie and I attended our first Pride event together that June, holding hands openly for the first time in daylight without fear of immediate family repercussions. The joy was tempered by the knowledge that my mother was probably lighting candles for my soul at that exact moment. Summer brought a new crisis. Valerie received a job offer in Portland, Oregon, a progressive high school that wanted her to develop a queer literature curriculum. It was everything she had dreamed of professionally, But it meant leaving Chicago, leaving the fragile new connection with my father, and stepping even further from any hope of reconciliation with my mother. We fought about it for the first time in our relationship, not screaming but the quiet, devastating kind of argument where both people are right and both are terrified. "You can't keep putting your life on hold for my family drama," she said one night, voice tight. "I've watched you check your phone every hour hoping your mom will call. That hope is eating you alive. And you want me to just walk away from the only parent who's trying?" I shot back. "After everything?" We went to bed angry. In the morning, Valerie left early for a meeting. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the half-written memoir proposal and realized the real choice wasn't between Chicago and Portland. It was between staying stuck in the role of the repentant daughter and becoming the woman who built her own life with the person she loved. When Valerie came home that evening, I had dinner waiting and an apology ready. "I'll go with you," I told her. "Portland. A fresh start. But I need to do one more thing before we leave." She raised an eyebrow, cautious. "I'm going to see my mother. Alone. No ambush. Just me telling her I love her. I forgive her for the prayer that started all this, and that the door is always open. After that, we move forward. Together." Valerie searched my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but I'm driving you there. And waiting outside. You don't have to face her alone." The drive back to the suburbs felt longer than it ever had. Autumn leaves were just beginning to turn, painting the familiar streets in golds and reds that somehow made the tension sharper. Valerie parked 2 blocks away from my childhood home, giving me space but staying close enough to be there if I needed her. I walked the rest of the way alone, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The house looked exactly the same. White siding, blue shutters, the maple tree in the front yard we had planted when I was 7. But everything inside me had changed. My mother answered the door after the second knock. She looked smaller somehow, thinner, the lines around her eyes deeper. For a moment neither of us spoke. "Emma," she finally said, voice flat. "I wasn't expecting you." "I know. I won't stay long. I needed to say some things in person." She didn't invite me inside. We stood on the porch like polite strangers. I could smell the familiar scent of her lavender candle drifting through the screen door. I took a deep breath and began. "I'm moving to Portland with Valerie. She got a teaching job there. It's a good opportunity for both of us. Before I go, I wanted you to know that I love you. I always have. The prayer you said that day, it hurt more than I can explain. But I understand now that you were scared. You thought you were losing me to something evil. I forgive you for that fear. And I hope one day you can forgive me for not being the daughter you planned." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. "Forgiveness? You think this is about forgiveness? You chose a lifestyle that goes against everything we taught you. Against God. And now you're dragging that poor girl across the country so you can keep living in sin. How am I supposed to forgive that?" Her words still stung, but they no longer had the power to make me doubt myself. That was the difference. "Because I'm happy, Mom. For the first time, I'm not praying every night to be someone else. I'm building a life with someone who sees me, all of me, and loves me anyway. If that's sin to you, I can't change your mind. But I can stop letting it define me." She looked away toward the street, jaw tight. "Your father has been different since he met her. Softer. He even defended you at prayer group last week." The others looked at him like he was crazy. A small, unexpected warmth bloomed in my chest. Dad was still fighting for me in his quiet way. "I'm glad," I said simply. "Tell him I love him. And tell Ryan, tell him I'm not the enemy. I'm still his sister." I turned to leave before the tears could overwhelm me. My mother's voice stopped me on the second step. "Emma." I looked back. She was crying openly now. "I pray for you every single day. Not to change you anymore. Just to keep you safe. That's all I have left." It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't a hug or an invitation to come inside. But it was something. A crack in the wall she had built. I nodded once, unable to speak, and walked back down the driveway. Valerie was leaning against the car when I reached her. She took one look at my face and opened her arms. I collapsed into them, sobbing quietly against her shoulder while she stroked my hair. "You did it," she whispered. "You faced her. Now we can go build our life." We drove away from the suburbs for what felt like the last time. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller until it disappeared around a curve. I didn't look back again. The move to Portland happened quickly after that. We found a small rental house with a backyard big enough for a garden Valerie wanted to plant. I finished the memoir proposal and sent it to the agent. Within a month we had an offer from a publisher, modest but real. The book would be called The Prayer I Couldn't Answer, and it would tell the whole story without sugarcoating any of the pain. Life in Oregon felt like breathing after years underwater. Valerie thrived at her new school. Students adored her. I wrote during the day and took long walks in Forest Park with her in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. The threats back in Chicago had mostly stopped once we were no longer visible targets. My father called every other Sunday. Our conversations were careful but growing warmer. Mom still didn't reach out, but Dad sometimes mentioned her asking indirect questions about how I was doing. Then came the invitation that tested everything we had rebuilt. A large Christian university in the Midwest wanted me to speak on a panel about faith and identity. The event was framed as compassionate dialogue, but I knew it could easily become an ambush. They offered to fly both Valerie and me out, cover expenses, and even suggested a private meeting with campus ministry leaders afterward. Valerie was against it immediately. You don't owe them your story again. You already put it in the book. This feels like they want to parade you as their token success story, or their cautionary tale. She was probably right. But part of me, the part that still carried the little girl who had prayed in secret for years, wondered if showing up as my whole self could plant a seed somewhere. For one confused student in the audience. For one parent like mine who was struggling. We argued about it for days. The discussion grew heated, exposing insecurities we had both buried. I accused her of wanting to keep me safe in our Portland bubble. She accused me of still seeking my family's approval through strangers. The fight ended with both of us in tears and a temporary cold silence that terrified me more than any external threat ever had. That night I found her on the back porch looking at the stars. I sat beside her without speaking at first. I'm scared, I admitted eventually. Scared that if I say no, I'm running away from the very conflict that shaped me. Scared that if I say yes, I'm inviting more pain into our life. Valerie reached over and took my hand. Then we decide together. Not because of your mom or the church or even the book sales. Because of who we are now. In the end I agreed to the panel but with strict conditions. No surprise guests, no ambush prayers, and Valerie would sit in the front row where I could see her. The university accepted. The flight back to the Midwest felt like traveling through time. When we landed I half expected my mother to be waiting at baggage claim with rosary in hand. She wasn't, of course. But my father was. He had driven 4 hours to meet us at the airport, something he had never done before. He hugged Valerie first, a real hug, not the stiff handshake from before. Then he held me at arm's length and smiled in a way that reached his eyes. You look happy, kiddo. Really happy. I was. Despite the nerves about the panel the next day I was. The auditorium was packed. Students, faculty, local clergy, and press filled every seat. I sat on the panel between a conservative theologian and a progressive pastor, with Valerie visible in the second row, her steady gaze anchoring me. Cameras rolled. My heart hammered against my ribs. The moderator opened with a question about whether faith and same-sex relationships could ever truly coexist. The theologian spoke first, quoting scripture with practiced ease. The progressive pastor offered a gentler counter. Then it was my turn. I looked out at the sea of faces and saw my younger self in several of them, nervous, hopeful, terrified of being broken. I thought of my mother's prayer, my father's slow steps toward understanding Valerie's unwavering love. I spent years on my knees asking God to change me. I began, voice surprisingly steady. I believed the love I felt for women was a test I was failing. Then I met Valerie and realized the real test was whether I had the courage to live authentically. My mother prayed for me to become normal. That prayer forced me to stop hiding. It cost me relationships, safety, and years of peace. But it also gave me the life I have now. One where I don't have to choose between faith and love, because I've redefined both on my own terms. The theologian interrupted politely but firmly. With respect, Emma, Scripture doesn't bend to personal experience. I met his eyes. And personal experience doesn't disappear because scripture is quoted at it. I still believe in God. I just no longer believe He hates the best parts of me. The room erupted in murmurs. Questions came fast and sharp. Some students thanked me with tears in their eyes. Others accused me of leading people astray. Through it all, Valerie never looked away. Her presence reminded me why I had come. After the panel, a small group of students waited to speak with me privately. One young woman, no older than 19, pulled me aside. "My parents are exactly like yours. I've been praying the same prayer for 3 years. Hearing you tonight, I think I can finally stop." I hugged her. In that moment, every painful choice felt worth it. That night back at the hotel, Valerie and I celebrated quietly with room service wine. She was proud of me in a way that made my chest ache with gratitude. But the real surprise came the next morning. My mother called. I almost dropped the phone when I saw her name. Valerie squeezed my shoulder for courage before stepping into the bathroom to give me privacy. "Emma." Mom's voice was different. Tired, uncertain, but no longer armored in anger. I watched the panel online. The whole thing. I waited, afraid to breathe. I didn't sleep after. Your father sat up with me. He showed me some of the letters you've written that I sent back. I read them this time. She paused, voice cracking. "You said you forgive me. I don't know if I deserve that. But I'm trying to understand. It's hard. The church taught me one way for so long. But seeing you up there, so sure of who you are, you looked like the little girl who used to argue with me about everything, only stronger." Tears slid down my face. "Mom, I'm still that girl. I just love differently than you expected." Another long silence. Then softly, "Maybe different isn't the same as wrong. I can't promise I'll ever march in any parades. But I'd like to meet Valerie again. Properly. When you're ready. And maybe come visit you in Portland someday. If you'll have me." It wasn't a full reconciliation. It was a beginning. The kind that would take years of hard conversations and setbacks. But it was more than I had dared hope for when I walked out of that living room 2 years earlier. Valerie came out of the bathroom when she heard me crying. I told her everything. She listened, then pulled me into the kind of embrace that felt like coming home after a long war. We flew back to Portland changed. The book launched a few months later to strong reviews and quiet controversy. I did interviews, some of them alongside Valerie, who handled the spotlight with her usual grace. My father visited twice that year. My mother came once, nervous and stiff at first, but she brought a small potted lavender plant for our garden and stayed for 4 days. She and Valerie spoke carefully about teaching and books. No one mentioned hell or conversion. Progress measured in small, cautious steps. Ryan even texted a photo of his new baby daughter with the caption, "She has your stubborn chin, sis." It was the closest thing to acceptance he could manage. Life settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than borrowed. Valerie and I talked about marriage, about maybe fostering kids one day, about the family we were creating instead of the one we had lost pieces of. The wounds remained. Some days the ache of my mother's earlier rejection still surfaced, but they no longer controlled us. One crisp autumn evening almost 3 years after that original prayer in the living room, Valerie and I sat on our back porch watching the sunset paint the Portland skyline. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple white gold ring with a tiny diamond flanked by 2 sapphires, the color of her eyes when she laughed. "I don't need a big wedding or anyone's blessing," she said, voice soft. "I just need you to keep choosing me every day the way I choose you. Emma Harper, will you marry me?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. 1,000 times yes. We kissed as the last light faded. 2 women who had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed but stronger, more honest and deeply in love. The wedding was small and perfect, held in a sunlit clearing in Forest Park surrounded by close friends, my father, Ryan and his wife, and, to everyone's quiet amazement, my mother. She wore a soft blue dress and cried during the vows, though she still clutched her rosary like a lifeline. When Valerie and I exchanged rings under a simple arch of greenery, Mom didn't look away. She even smiled, small and tentative but real. Afterward we danced under strings of lights while someone played an old jazz record. My father twirled me once, whispering, "I'm proud of you, kiddo. Took me too long to get here, but I'm here." My mother hugged Valerie briefly, the first time she had ever done so. No grand speeches about change, just the quiet acknowledgement that love, however it looked, had outlasted the prayer that once tried to erase it. Life after the wedding continued its gentle forward momentum. My second book, a collection of essays about faith, identity, and the messy middle ground, found an audience hungry for nuance. Valerie became department chair at her school and started a support group for queer teens from religious families. We fostered a teenage girl named Maya for 8 months, watching her bloom from a scared, angry kid into a confident young woman who called us both moms by the end. There were still hard days. My mother had occasional relapses into worry and subtle guilt-tripping during phone calls. Ryan struggled to explain our family to his church friends. Threats occasionally resurfaced online whenever I published something new. But each time the storm came, Valerie and I faced it together, stronger for every previous battle. One rainy Sunday afternoon, I found my mother's original rosary in a drawer while cleaning. I had taken it with me the day I left home. A strange keepsake of the moment that had both broken and freed me. I sat on the floor turning the beads over in my hands, remembering the desperation in her voice as she prayed for me to become normal. Valerie walked in and saw me there. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me and rested her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly. "All the pain, the lost years with my family, the public fights?" She thought for a long moment. "I regret the pain you carried alone for so long before I met you. But I don't regret us. Not for a second. Every scar we have proves we chose truth over comfort. That's rare." I leaned into her, breathing in the familiar scent of home. Later that evening, I placed the rosary in a small wooden box on our bookshelf, not hidden but no longer a weapon or a wound. A reminder of where we had been and how far we had come. Years passed. We grew older together, lines appearing around our eyes from laughter more than tears. Maya stayed in touch, eventually introducing us to her own partner. My parents aged, their health requiring more visits. Mom and I never became the close mother-daughter duo of her dreams, but we built something honest, conversations that no longer required pretending. She even attended a book reading once, sitting in the back row and clapping at the end. Looking back at the woman I was the day my mother dropped to her knees in prayer, I barely recognize her. That Emma was terrified, ashamed, and convinced she had to choose between love and family. The woman I became learned that sometimes the bravest act is refusing to make that false choice at all. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, painful, and full of irreversible decisions. But it was ours. And every sacrifice, every confrontation, every tear had led to this quiet, hard-won peace. In the end, the question remains for anyone who has ever been prayed over, judged, or told their love is wrong. Was the real sin hiding who you were to keep the peace? Or finally speaking the truth even when it shattered everything you once called home?